Well, we've said for a long time, most of us in the House have said one bill makes sense. Listen, we've got to get everybody on the same page. The more bills you have, the more uncertainty you interject into this whole process. You know, we're talking about tax cuts, border, energy independence, and spending cuts. Out of those four things, there's a million things that could go wrong in each one of the four policy objectives. I think the only way to go forward, like the president has said, like our speaker has said, like our appropriations chair has said, one big bill. And you know what? Quite frankly, it's frustrating that we can't land on an answer. Even if it was two bills, somebody make the call and go forward. We can't be messing around with this. In my opinion, it should be one bill. That's where House leadership has been. That's where Jason Smith, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, has been. And I'm hopeful that we get there. But I'll tell you, the way it is right now, and I was on the phone last night with House leadership, some members of House leadership, they were still working at 11:30 back and forth trying to figure out how they could make this meeting at the White House very productive today. And I actually think they made some good progress last night in the Speaker's office. I really credit folks like Mike Johnson and Chip Roy. They are working this out, trying to get to yes, and I'm confident we'll get there. It's always messy. But democracy is messy, and our process is messy, but the result will be good.
So who is most contributing to the mess right now, Congressman? Is it the hardline conservatives in your conference who are pushing for steeper spending cuts, or is it antsy senators like Senator Lindsey Graham who are trying to get ahead of your chamber's work?
You know, in my opinion, the House of Representatives wants deeper spending cuts than maybe the Senate does right now. That's just me reading the situation. I'm interested in spending cuts that change the trajectory of our $36 trillion deficit. I want to see big things done because I want to put this whole crisis with our debt behind us. Not everybody has the same interest there. So from where I sit, it's not whether we extend the tax cuts or the border or energy independence. Everything we're talking about now really concerns how deep do we cut, what do we cut, and how does it look, and how do we explain it to the American people.
Well, so can you shed a little more light on what the discussion is around what and how deep will be cut, considering it does seem that there isn't much appetite to cut mandatory spending, and yet if you're trying to get spending cuts of the size that some of your colleagues want, you might have to tap into somewhere.
Well, absolutely. We do have to tap into mandatory spending. That said, in reconciliation, you can't touch Social Security. The president has said he does not want to see any cuts to the benefits delivered to patients for Medicare, and I'm now hearing Medicaid. However, there are things that we can do. There are provider taxes that are paid by healthcare providers, and then they get a rebate back on that. That's not a fee for service. There's different types of funding for social safety net programs. There's things that we don't think work very well that have been funded for years. There's also student loans, and should we put a cap on some of those things? There's a variety of ways to cut. You'll see a menu of options that'll come out in March, and it will be littered with a collection of ideas, some of which Americans are going to really not be for. But hey, if we don't sacrifice, if we don't understand that this is going to be a painful process, nothing's going to change. And I guess my message to the American people is we as a nation, as Americans, have to recognize that this is such a big problem, our debt, that we're going to have to say no to some programs that we like, but we simply can't afford. And it's easier said than done. I'm ready to go there. I've been preparing my constituents for such a thing. We need the buy-in of the American people to say, you know what, this is short-term pain for long-term national security, not living under this crippling $36 trillion debt.
Well, and we know the debt reduction efforts aren't just within your chamber or Congress. It's also actively underway at the Department of Government Efficiency through the efforts of Elon Musk. And already we're seeing movement there and through executive orders as well. Is any of this front-running the ability to get these spending cuts on paper in the reconciliation process, though, Congressman? How does this all fit together?
Well, I think there are some things that DOJ can tell us about that we can do in the reconciliation. Others will be executive branch options. I'm glad of your reporting today. I had the same conversation with our Treasury Secretary on Monday night. I asked him, does Elon Musk or DOJ have direct access to the federal payment system? He said no. They have a read-only access of past expenditures. That's no different than a state auditor having access to all the expenditures in a state budget. I don't see why that is so alarming. But I did make clear to the Treasury Secretary that we're counting on him to do a good job. We're counting on him to protect Americans' private information. And I also told him that at the end of the day, Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse. And ultimately, if these things are going to get solved, it has to go through Congress.
Well, and Congress also, of course, has oversight responsibility. Should Elon Musk be added to that? Does he need to come testify in Congress as to what exactly Doge is doing, have some form of the legislative branch holding him accountable?
Well, I'll tell you what, right now he's acting at the behest of the president who just won a national election on this very issue of cutting government spending. I also understand that Elon Musk can't make any changes to the federal payment system, so he's in a read-only capacity. People are going to react to whatever he puts on his platform called X. But ultimately, and I've heard this from the president, I've heard this from the president's people, there's only one person that speaks for this administration, and that is President Trump himself. And President Trump has said there are things we are going to agree on with Elon, there's things we might not do. I think there's an appropriate level of oversight. Again, Elon is only entitled to a read-only version of federal expenditures. That's not crippling democracy in any way. That's finding out what's been going on with this huge bureaucracy. And quite frankly, a lot of the folks that I represent are like, finally, someone's looking into this. And I'm excited about where we can go as a member of Congress. I want to compliment what Doge is doing by making those cuts permanent.
Well, Congressman, I'd like to ask you about what else your branch is going to have to achieve in the not-so-distant future here. We've obviously begun our conversation on reconciliation, but there are still funding measures that need to somehow get passed, if not another continuing resolution by mid-next month, a debt ceiling deadline that is going to be looming as we get closer and closer to the X date with each passing day. How do those things get done? And frankly, are you able to do it alone as Republicans, or do you need Democratic support?
Well, I'm one of 435, but I think we should put the debt ceiling conversation and the policy in our reconciliation package and get that passed if we can do it in a timely manner. You know, we've got to deal with government funding expiration on March 14th. One of the things I want to see us implement our 2024 budget priorities. We should not be living under a budget that was signed by Joe Biden. It was also authored by Senate Democrats with House Republicans. I want a 2024 budget that's put in place until we get to our 2025 budget that has our priorities in it, our focus. I don't want another simple continuing resolution just to kick the can down the table. And if I were an appropriator, I would think that would be a slap in the face. They spent all last year putting a budget together, and we're going to simply just do a kick the can down the hill maneuver with another continuing resolution. Listen, we're here to govern. We've put the time in. Let's make that our funding policy for 2024 and get that done.
Well, as you allude to kicking the can, though, at least in most recent history, that can can't be kicked without Democratic feet also taking part in the can kicking. It has had to be a bipartisan initiative, Congressman. And based on the kind of temperature in the House right now and how displeased Democrats seem to be with some of what has gone on in the last few weeks, are you confident that those votes will still be provided to make up for Republicans who very well might not vote for some of these policies that we're talking about here?
Well, you know, we're talking about continuing budget funding. This isn't a vote on reconciliation. I know that Tom Cole, our appropriations chairman, talks with his counterparts on a bipartisan basis in the Senate and certainly here in the House. Appropriators have their own language. They know how to work through these funding issues. They've done this for years and years and years. I'm confident that we can work in a bipartisan basis. Listen, outside of reconciliation, if we're going to make any progress the next 2 years, we're going to have to work with 53 senators and 7 Democrats at a minimum to make the government run. And so that should come as no surprise. We can achieve that. We've done it before. It will require some compromise. But you know what? I've voted for those continuing resolutions. I've been a part of the bipartisan effort to put them together. As the vice chair of the Main Street Caucus, you know, almost 85 members strong, we are the ones that come to work every day, that make sure that America is open for business, that our bills are paid, and that we are responsibly governing. And I can tell you, We will get past March 14th. The government will be funded. We'll figure out our plan on the debt service or the debt limit.